Hey everyone, welcome to the Season 9.1 draft analysis. I'm Black Jay, Coach Adam, and we also have Berditto, Coach Kyle on the line as well. Say hi, Berditto.
Hey yo, what is up?
I'm excited about this one. This is what our fourth draft analysis. Is that
Yeah, I think it
right?
is. I think it is our fourth, and I'm excited about this one in particular because we're trying to do it a little bit different. Basically, for the first half of the video, we are going to go over what we're calling superlatives or like awards for one example would be like best speed tiers or something like that, or best Dragon Fairy Steel Core, things like that. We're going to go over the awards and which teams we think got honorable mentions and then which teams got the final awards. And that'll kind of help give you a little bit of an overview of the teams. That'll be the first half of the video. And then the second half of the video, we're going to go through and do the rest of the analysis of each team. And this time we're going to do it instead of draft order, which we have been doing it in, we're going to be doing it in sort of our graded order. So
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a way to keep you guys hooked throughout the video.
yeah. And I'll just go ahead and say, I think from everything that I heard people say after the draft, and my own opinion, has been the most successful draft
Mm-hmm.
so far. I think we maybe had the highest quality of teams draft. So keep in mind when we're giving out, everyone's teams are just as good or better than in the past, and especially if you're comparing maybe the grade you got this season versus the grade you got last season. Know that we graded a little bit more harshly because all the teams were so much better, in my opinion.
Right. And so, yeah, the letter grade doesn't matter as much as like the analysis that's tied to it. I remember last time Adam gave an A plus to someone, to Colin, and the highest grade I gave was an A minus. And as Adam said, he graded more harsh, so he thinks the teams are better. But his highest grade this time, I think he only gave one A. So don't worry as much about the grade itself as much as the analysis that's tied to it. But let's go over the superlatives. You should see a list of them on your screen now if I did my After Effects correctly. But Adam, why don't you go through the first couple? As you'll kind of see if you look at the order, we tried to put a little bit of a logic to them. The front ones are a little bit more analytical, and towards the back half they start to get more subjective, more just based on how we see them. It's a little bit easy to just like do the math and find, okay, who has the best speed tiers or something like that. But once you start getting to the bottom ones, it's a little bit more of Adam and I's professional opinions. But
Yeah. All right. So starting off, we're gonna best speed tiers. I think this is pretty easy to tell. We can kind of we'll pull up the teams that had the top ones and go through and just look at where they if they have any gaps, where their top speed is, where their bottom speed is, and things like. We have best hazard setters. So this includes not only which Pokemon can set up hazards easily, having good type matchups and things like that. But also what kinds of hazards, did you draft a sticky web setter? Did you draft a toxic setter? Things like that. Best hazard removal, obviously, not only defog, but wrap, or in a few instances, we have magic bounce users as well. So you can kind of see that. And then next, we have the things that I'm most excited about. It's called the best physical special. So in the past, we've seen some teams rely very heavily on physical mons, very heavily on special mons. In this draft, we actually had a few teams that had a really nice split. Their setup sweepers, their wall breakers, things like that.
right.
So we're going to give out that award.
Yeah. So you're cutting up a little bit, so I'll take over for the next few. So yeah, the best physical special split helps to figure out which teams are balanced offensively on each side of offense. The next one would be best Dragon Fairy Steel Core, best Fire Water Grass Core, and then best alternative type core. So not every typing core fits inside Dragon Fairy Steel, Fire Water Grass. That's what this one is about. Number 8 would be the best offensive core, then best defensive core. These aren't tied to typings. And then number 10 is checks all the boxes. This one is basically just as it says. This, if you had like a rubric for school, it was like, okay, well, does it check all the boxes? And we think that these teams at least checked all the boxes, which is, I think, a great honor. That's kind of something that I strive for in my drafts, and I know Adam does as well.
Mm-hmm.
I put a lot of stupid side energy in like, oh, what does a team need? Does it need a this or that? So that's what this is getting at.
4 default.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So the next one is the most tried and true, and we couldn't really figure out the best name for this category, but this is like, so the Porch League has a history. This is season 9, the start of season 9. We've had 8 previous seasons, and there are some things that are just like, we have learned as a league work. And so this is a little bit kind of like a reference to Porch history, which teams are like leaning in on the history, on like what we know works for the league. Yeah.
Yep. And so after that, for our last two, the most innovative draft, almost sort of counterposed with most tried and true, what's sort of stretching the bounds of what the Porch League knows. And then we also have most improved draft. So compared with last season. So if this is your first season, you're not eligible for this. But yeah, so those are the 13 superlatives for our 13 coaches.
Great.
Why don't we get right into it?
Awesome. So the first one up is best speed tiers. And the first honorable mention for best speed tiers is a rookie coach, Columbus Cobalions, Coach Ryan. Adam, why don't you tell us about his speed tiers?
Yeah, the speed tiers are incredible. Coach Ryan drafted a pretty hyper offense team. And so he has most of his speed tiers being 1 Tapu Koko and 72. And, there's most coaches then go down and have speed below base 72, which is what Zarina is, in like 60 and 40, 30s and 20s and things like that. And Ryan really keeps his speed in the upper end. So I think these speed tiers are great. There are no noticeable speed gaps. He has Pokemon base 110, base and again base 130 to outspeed a lot of. So I really like these speed tiers.
Yeah, I agree. There's not really anything else. I do like seeing Cofagrigus at the bottom, because when I see speed tiers that start at 72 and go all the way up to 130, I'm immediately thinking like, do I have a way to outslow it? Like maybe do a Trick Room team, and Cofagrigus kind of blocks that on the other side pretty well. I mean, Cofagrigus is a very potent sweeper on Trick Room, so it's like very hyper offense, fast, and then it's like, don't even try it on the other side. So that's just a cool little quirk that I think helped keep it in the category of best speed tiers.
Yeah. So next up, we have Coach Brian in the Hippo speed tiers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those, Kyle?
Yeah, I think this is a good. I think Brian is generally, even from his first draft, is one of the best at making sure he gets a variety of Pokemon above base 100. So he's not just, I don't know, he doesn't resort to just his Mega or just one fast flying type that can click U-turn or something. But so he has, in the top of his speed, he has Cryogonal, Mienshao, Salazzle, and Mega Beedrill. And they don't really have, maybe there's like a rock weakness up there, but I mean, he below that he has Lando, Porygon Z, and Rotom Wash. So he has quite a variety above base 100, which he'll find to be very useful in his draft. And then kind of on the lower side, he has some things like Registeel, Tangrowth, Sylveon, and Jellicent that will help honestly be a bit of a defensive core and a little bit of a faster defensive core. Like Jellicent, I think, is a pretty good stall breaker because at base 60, it's still faster than a lot of defensive Pokemon. So, yeah, and there's like Adam really likes the between 100 and base 80 range. So
Yeah.
tell me about that.
Yeah, I think seeing both Landorus and Porg occupy that kind of range. I had Landorus and Roserade, who's also Roserade is base 90 speed, and I really appreciated that. So you can run slow Landorus, you can run Choice Scarf Landorus. And we see here also good Choice Scarfers like Mienshao, Landorus, and Rotom. And also we see a bit of a speed gap between Rotom Wash and Jealous, which really lets bulky Landorus or bulky Rotom Wash kind of nestle in that base 70 range.
Yeah.
Running uninvested speeds. I think,
right.
That really shores up what looks like it could be a problem.
Yeah. I would say the only reason he's not getting the award is because generally there's a lot of good Pokemon, legendaries, mythical Pokemon that sit right at base speed 100 that have like either 100s across the board or something similar to that. And he's going to have to deal with those with some of these faster, frailer Pokemon rather than having something that can compete at it. But yeah, I think he'll do well with these speed tiers, and I think it really works with what Brian generally succeeds with. Mm-hmm. So the best speed tiers, go to your boy Punxsutawney Pachirisu.
Hey, thanks.
Coach Adam. If there's one thing Adam thinks about before going to bed, it is speed tiers.
I've had confession. I will wake up sometimes on a Saturday morning and what speed tiers can I draft this? Can I get this speed tier? What's it?
Right.
Happened more than once.
So this is Adam lived up to his own life goals. And like it's literally like minus 10. It's like 125, minus 10, minus 10, minus 10, minus 10, minus 10. Like, so there's not a speed gap at all. Maybe there's something above 125 that he's missing, but I mean, it's like, what I like too is Tapu Fini isn't your mid 80s like speed option. That's Rotom Heat, and it leaves Tapu Fini to not run speed if it doesn't want to or something. In my other league, I have Tapu Fini, and I think only once out of 7 games have I run much speed on it at all. So that kind of sits closer in this range. But yeah, it's really good options. Maybe once again you can have, if I'm being the most nitpicky, Zygarde is going to be annoyed by those base 100s, but at the same time it's forcing them to run Jolly or Timid or things like that, so they have to like forego some attack in order to like make sure it outspeeds Zygarde. And with that base 95 Zygarde, because of the threat of Dragon Dance, all of like basically you have to just assume that if you have a Pokemon at greater than 95, you have to Scarf it to just counter a +1 Zygarde or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I was very proud of the speed tiers, and we try to stay away from ranking our own teams. So I let Kyle pick this one. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was well worth it. I think that Adam's being humble right now. I think it's pretty evident if you went through all of the different teams, he just like, if it's speed tiers, he's got it. So that's why he got this one. Next up is best hazard setters. We're gonna do setters and removers separate, but for setters, we're gonna start with Houston Haxorus.
Yeah, Houston Haxorus. So if we look at Haxorus's team, we're seeing Pokemon like Excelgor, which is base 145 with We're seeing Mamoswine, Rocker, Skarmory, which is one of the best hazard setters in the game. And I think these three together, just a lot of options. I can't remember off the top of my head if Dragalge gets.
Yeah, it gets toxic spikes.
Yeah, that's great. So you have, and it's a toxic spike absorber, which is cool. I guess that's more in the removal. But I think just the variety of typings of Pokemon that have hazard options, the variety of speed tiers, and the opportunities to get them in, I think really put the Haxorus in the sort of like best hazard setter conversation.
Right. It's like you have Skarmory, who has is weak to only a few typings, and those typings aren't that similar to Mamoswines, who aren't that similar to Dragalges, who aren't that similar to Excelgor. So it's not like you could just run one Pokemon that can relieve the burden of hazards or something like that. I think his hazards are pretty cool, and that's why he gets that's why Ian gets honorable mention here.
Yep. Great. So let's move on. Next we have Coach Kyle. So Kyle, if we look at your team, so you're sporting Greninja, you're sporting Mew. I didn't know this, but Kommo gets Stealth Rocks, sporting Seismitoad and Mega. These are five Mons. Most of them are just Rockers, with Greninja being the notable exception. But Greninja is one of the best in OU, but absolutely in our draft league. It gets spikes and toxic spikes, and the threat of it being scarfed means it scares out most other hazard setters. So it's a great lead. And we see Pokemon like Mew, Pokemon like Kommo that can do so many other different things. So this is really nice. You see Mew, you expect Stealth Rocks, you come out and it's used nasty plot. And so these are part of the things that make some of Kyle's hazard setters very successful. And Mega Aggron is great here. It with filter and with its defense, even earthquakes from common hazard setters aren't really doing too much too. It can really get in those rocks freely. So
yeah, I wanted to make
Kyle. Yeah.
I mean, I knew I wanted to draft Mew once Celesteela was taken off the board. And at that point it was like I just wanted to make sure that Mew didn't always have to run Stealth Rocks or something like that. And I think with Seismitoad, Aggron, and Kommo being all my Stealth Rockers, it's like, okay, one can be offensive that week and the other can be defensive or whatever. And so I don't think I'll get much. I hope I won't get much for Move Slot Syndrome with any of my Stealth Rockers this season.
Right. And you're not suffering. Yeah. A lot of hazard setters suffer from, sort of being passive. I had Ferrothorn last season, which can be sort of a passive Pokemon. And so I'm excited being able to put in a lot of offense.
Right. Everyone should be scared of offensive Seismitoad. It's going to come at least once in this 8 weeks. All right. Number one, right. Orlando Magikarp.
Hey.
You did it. You made the list. Best hazard setters. Let's look at them.
They're insane. We have Galvantula, the fast sticky web user. It's so good. We have Glisker. We have Cloyster, which last season we saw as our MVP and usually as an offensive setup Pokemon. We have this base 180. This thing is really bulky and it can set up spikes when you are switching out to your off for setup Cloyster. So that's really nasty. Clefable, which was one of the best rockers. Bronzong, which is one of those tried and true Pokemon that our league just loves.
Right.
Yeah. And does Aldino get Stealth?
No.
Rock?
I don't think so. Okay. Maybe it does. I'll check on the side, but you keep talking about them.
So we have something that we were talking about with Kyle is, again, Pokemon like Cloyster who have offensive pressure, but also hazards. Things like Clefable, where you might be worried about a Magic Guard Calm Mind set, or Galvantula with Compound Eyes has and bug electric offensive typing is pretty
Right.
effective. You can go through subs with bug buzz. You can hit your yeah. I just think being able to look at the diversity of types here,
Right.
like two of these Pokemon aren't affected by Earthquake. We have Gliscor and Bronzong
Right.
who
None of his
levitate.
stealth rockers are super effective to Earthquake, which is maybe unique.
Yeah, it's very effective. It's gonna, I think, help Ben out in his matches.
Yeah. I think one thing that I guess Ben, if you're listening, I would really challenge you to explore all of the different options that you have on your team when it comes to setters, because every week you're not going to need webs. Every week you're not going to need spikes, stuff like that. And it'll be because you have Gliscor and Bronzong. It'll be like and Clefable. You don't have to just use the same sets. So I challenge you to use the diversity that you drafted in the 8 games that you have. That's all I'll say. Because your team is awesome, and these are, like I said, these are the best. Like we said, these are the best setters.
And I think it fits with your playstyle, Ben. We noticed last season, I think you had Araquanid and you had a couple other hazard setters that were really well. And so I think we hazards well last season and hope to see it more of it this season.
Yeah, I think one more thing as well. I think his hazards are really, really good too with Charizard X, especially with what's that thing called? Galvantula's sticky webs. Right. Because I mean, you'll see the Dragon Dance Charizard X just mow through teams, because once it gets one Dragon Dance up and it has Earthquake, Dragon Claw,
Flare Blitz,
and another move, something like that, everything goes down. Everything dies. Maybe he runs Roost, maybe he doesn't. And the cool thing though is with sticky webs, he might actually be able to run some Swords Dance Charizard X sets. Most times when I see like a Charizard or another something that is quad weak to Stealth Rocks, then I'm like, oh, I just want to put up Stealth Rocks and that's all I got to do, because it's going to come in, take 4 times the damage. But he might actually help out his Charizard by putting sticky webs down, and it'll force his opponent to defog hazards that would normally affect Charizard, because he can't lose if his or because his opponent's going to lose if he's -1 speed on all his Pokemon.
Yeah. Yes. I think especially for that reason of having hazards coupled with a Pokemon with great offensive pressures, Ben wins the top spot for best hazards.
Cool. So now we're on to hazard removal.
Yes. So first up, we have Coach Colin in the Baltimore Braviary. So let's look at his removal options. So we see Crobat, we see Rotom Frost, we see Fortress, and we see Mega Sableye with Magic.
Does Miltank get Rapid Spin?
Miltank gets defog. I do not know. Let me check.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Okay. It just spins.
Yeah. So one thing we always love to see is a Rapid Spinner in Fortress, which that base 140 defense, if you can keep it out in front of physical mons, gives it, and it's only one, gives it plenty of opportunities to Rapid Spin, and obviously Mega Sableye. The threat of Mega Sableye switching in on your hazard setter is something you definitely don't want to risk a stall team like this.
Right.
Hazards are going to be really in these games, I think.
Right. I think greater than 2 times there will be games that end and Stealth Rocks, maybe a Spike, will be on the opponent's side and nothing will be on Baltimore's side. So that damage will add up very fast, and it's really hard to deal with when you're dealing with stall, because Colin's going to want games to last 40, 50, 60 turns, and taking a quarter of your health no, 12th of your health to stealth rocks or whatever it is. Every time you
Mm-hmm.
come in, it's like, okay, well, you can only come in X number of times. So,
Yep. I'll say I was helping Colin prep last for week one against you in a couple hours. And I spent, it must have been between 20 and 25 turns actively trying to get stealth rocks in.
yeah.
And it took me that where all I was doing was pivoting around to get stealth rocks in. And
Right.
because Mega Sableye is so threatening
We'll,
with that magic round.
we'll see if I win the Hazard War in a couple hours. Right now, it's 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 30th, and Colin and I's match is around 9 o'clock. So hopefully get this podcast done by then, and hopefully I win the Hazard Wars. It helps because we named me as the best hazard removal.
Hey.
So why don't you talk about me?
Oh yeah, well, we shouldn't skip over Ian's team though. We also
dang!
As an honorable mention for best hazard. Yep, a little bit ahead of yourself there.
Hey,
so we have
Adam and I are both drinking a little bit right now, so my apologies.
It's important because these are always twice as long as we think they're going to be.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about Ian. So he has Starmie as a rapid spinner, Mega Altaria as a cool bulky op. We're Defog, Skarmory, one of the best defoggers, and I believe that's it. But just like the utility of those three, with Skarmory being incredibly effective, can pivot in on, it's immune to spikes, neutral to stealth rocks, great defog, doesn't care about toxics, doesn't care about earthquakes.
Right.
Yeah, is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about his. I mean, Haxorus was honorable mention for hazard setters and is honorable mention for hazard removal, and is the only team that has both of those. So if there is someone set up to win the Hazard War, it's going to be Ian and the Houston Haxorus. If you just like look at his team, it's just like such good options for removal, whether it's rapid spinning or removal altogether. And like, I mean, not to jump too far ahead, but there might not be too much straight up like out the gate offensive pressure on his team. But that might not be necessary when you're able to win the Hazard Wars.
Yep. And contrary to what you just said, he's not the only person to be on both the best hazard setters and best removal list.
Oh gosh,
you look who's laughing now. Yeah, we have you on that as the winning superlative for best hazard removal. Congratulations!
Hey, thanks. I was very surprised, I guess.
So if you look at, I really think that I really wish that there were a rapid spinner on this team, but the removal options are too good to not name this as the best. So we see Florges, one of the best defoggers in the game, Mew, or Zapdos and Mew, both some of the best defoggers in it. He just has three of the best defoggers in the game. It's hard to get around that. And especially, I don't know, just any of these other Pokemon, looking at like U-turn with Mew and Zapdos, things like that, U-turns with Darmanitan and Greninja. It's going to be really easy to get these defoggers in. My only sort of hesitation, or maybe not hesitation, but just I'll be curious to see how you manage setting up your own hazards versus without a rapid spinner.
Yeah, it'll be, I hope, easier. Hopefully not easier said than done, because it's like none of my hazard removal options share weaknesses. It's not like I have two flying types that both get defog or something like that. Yeah, sure, it's all defog, but it's three different typings. And I hope that it's like not Zapdos every week or something like that, or
Right.
not Florges every week. We'll see though. Maybe I'll run defog on all 3 in one game.
Every single week. And Stealth Rocks on Mew.
And Stealth Rocks on Mew.
Right. But with things like Heal Bell on Florges to, sort of get rid of Toxics, Zapdos being immune to Earthquakes, Synchronize, and pretty handily. I think you're going to be doing well in the defog and the hazard removal game.
Cool.
Okay.
So yeah, look to Houston Haxorus and Columbus Mercury for hopefully setting the tone for what hazards are going to be like this season.
Yeah.
The next category is best physical special split, and we actually have 3 honorable mentions this time before we get to the candidate or the team that won the category. So the first honorable mention is rookie coach Columbus Cobalions.
Yeah, look at this team. If you have it up, great. If not, Tapu Koko is great. Mixed attacker, base 115 attack, base 95 special attack. And we saw Work Up Tapu Koko put in some work a few seasons ago. Kyle's still a little bitter about that one. But yeah, we have following that we have physical setup in Hawlucha. We have special setup in Megalodion. Again, special setup in Volcarona, and physical setup in Lucario.
Yeah, physical and special in Lucario, and Moxie Boost Crocodile.
Yeah. This team is crazy.
And special setup in Kofagrigus.
Yeah, and technically, Comfy has special setup too. Special setup with priority. This is looking like a lot of the team. And also, don't sleep on Passimian because it gets Defiant now, so it's going to switch in on your G. So it's basically his entire team. And it's pretty well balanced between physical and special. Right.
I mean, yeah, he has potentially Crocodile as a physical Scarfer, Lucario as a special Scarfer. He has speed boosting physical side with Hawlucha's Unburden, and speed boosting special side with Volcarona. So that's a good split. And if you look down here, just even at the base stat totals of attack and special attack, they're within 100 points of each other. So you might think some of the special attack looks kind of low, but that's just because it's not accounting for all of the setup options that there are. And same with the attack. He's got attack. He's got special attack.
Right. And so next we have Coach Sean and the Las Vegas Venusaurs having a pretty great physical special split as well. For speedy Pokemon, he has both Jolteon and Lycanroc Day, which is really cool. So we have a fast special Pokemon. We're seeing Mega Gardevoir as a special wall breaker, and things like Banded Jirachi as a physical wall breaker. Again,
or like Scarf,
right.
Ironhead Jirachi.
Right. Yeah, it's great. And Conkeldurr down here as a nice physical kind of setup grade, sitting up here as a nice special attacker. And don't forget about those technician boosted hidden power moves. The base 90 power, same as Flamethrower, same as Dazzling Gleam, same as Thunderbolt.
And not many Pokemon get any base stats that are 150 or higher. And on the special side, Mega Gardevoir has that kind of stat. And I'm going to include Conkeldurr because of its different abilities like Guts and Sheer Force as it's functionally greater than 150 base stat. So having one on each side really just helps with that physical special split. So your opponents are more likely to have forced to run both physically defensive Pokemon, and it's not just enough to put an Assault Vest on a Metagross and say, okay, I got it covered. You're going to need, okay, what's covering his defense? What's covering his special?
Right. Yeah, so I'm excited to see what Sean does with it. And our third honorable mention is Coach Ben and the Orlando Magikarp. So yeah, tell us a little bit about his physical special split.
Right. So, I mean, if you just look at the base stat totals, they are as split as you could be with only 5 points separating the two. This is a little masked by the fact that Mega Charizard X has a special stat of 130, but I mean, you still have Gengar and oddly enough, Vaporeon, but also things like Calm Mind, Clefable. Lurantis has Defiant, so it's kind of like a mid-tier, low-tier version of Superior. So and Galvantula, even though its stat is below 100 because of Compound Eyes, increasing its accuracy, it's able to run moves like Thunder, which functionally makes it more of a special attacker. And then on the physical side, I mean, you have the King Mega Charizard X. You have Gliscor, which just like Lando is could be a defensive Pokemon that you don't even have to run any attack investment to have Earthquakes do a lot of damage. You have Setup Cloyster, and you have Girder down here. I mean, even like Lurantis, you could run choice band sets. You could run choice scarf sets to outspeed some things in the like high 90s or things like that. So just a good, well balanced offense. And each week, you might be able to get away with figuring out how to cover for Charizard X. Is that going to leave you open to a Calm Mind Clefable sweep? Or is Lurantis going to break for Charizard 1 week and then the next week break for Clefable?
Yeah,
it's a cool team.
Sounds like we're going to be getting some of those Clefable sweeps in here. So
I hope so.
I'm expecting that. I don't think I ever pulled it off, but yeah. And our recipient of the best physical special split, we have the Anchorage Ninetales, Brian Schmidt.
Yeah.
And again, just looking at the base stat total, we have only 3 points difference. 116 base attack, 1016 base attack, 1019. And I think this is particularly impressive and shows a lot of improvement when you compare with Brian's team from last season, which I think might do a little bit later, where he was very heavily on the physical side. And so this time he picked up some cool mons. Kieran Black is a great mixed wall. And he picked up some things like Mismagius and Raikou on the special side, and also Mega Blastoise. Nido. So a lot of kind of scary names that jump out. And we're seeing things like Talonflame, which I'm really glad he picked as his, because even though that base 81 attack is a little bit lower than you might be thinking. I don't know if you all have had experienced the fear of Talonflame, but those priority Brave Birds, priorities Flyiniums are just crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
I think is that the only priority Z move?
I think it is. Yeah. Priority Z move.
Attacking you. There might be some if you're like Prankster and have a Z move, but like offensive Z moves, the only priority one would be Gale Wings, 100 HP, Talonflame.
Right. And don't forget, some people think like, oh, I can just get a U-turn off on Talonflame, or I can just get a Stealth Rocks or something and be fine. Talonflame gets Roost. So you can just Roost back up. I don't know if a bulky Talonflame is actually viable, but I'd love to see it tried where you just run it with Roost, get back up, Gale Wing, run an SD set. Yeah, priority Brave Bird. That's great.
I listened to a podcast recently about the difference between Gen 6 Draft League and Gen 7 Draft League, and they mentioned Talonflame as being one of the biggest nerfs because it used to just be the legend. Gale Wings in Gen 6, any flying move at any health was priority +1. Is that right? So now it has to be at everything. Yeah, so it used to be top 5 draft every time. Now it has a little bit more of a niche, but I don't think his team relies on it at all. I mean, he's got freaking Kieran Black on the team. He can run a Bandit Absol or a Swords Dance. He's got Metagross. So I think it works really well on this team. And I think it really helps. I think having it's like not only good to get to win the category best physical special split, but especially when you have a Pokemon like Kieran Black. That's what you need to do when you draft Kieran Black is to make sure it doesn't have to run special Ice Beam every time or physical, or it can be a mixed set and it's not ruining your squad. Like you can run maybe what's that, Bolt Strike on the
Yep.
physical side and then run
Yep.
special. And it's not like you're not compromising anything because you still have that offensive pressure on each side. So this is an awesome example of what we meant by the category best physical special split.
All right. So we look at our best Dragon Fairy Steel cores, and I think we have quite a few. We have 4 honorable mentions,
Right.
and then a winner here. So our first honorable mention is, again, new coach Columbus Cobalions, coming in with a great team. Why don't you tell us about this core of Megaladios, Lucario, Tapu Koko?
I mean, yeah, first round Tapu Koko, second round Megaladios. It's like it's a surprise that it is honorable mention. So it's incredible. I don't think it like happens in draft leagues that much that you get both of those. I think that's slightly a result of Megaladios being taken so late. Like, I mean, once you get past 5th overall in the draft, then you're thinking it's probably going to be gone. So you're building your team around Celesteela. You're thinking of other um, late round 1 picks, and you're getting all your hopes up for the teams that you can build around it. By the time it gets to your turn at pick 11, you don't want to sacrifice all the prep that you've had to pick up such a crazy Pokemon. So I mean, Coco Latios, Megaladios is incredible in Draft League. It's almost busted, probably busted. And then like I think the only weakness to it is that Lucario is awesome, but I think still solidly a tier 2 Pokemon. And I think we'll see it less and less than. I mean, it's a steel type that is neutral to fairy, and it shares a weakness with Coco. So there's like a little bit of like dyssynergy in this, but it's like honorable mention for sure because they're all offensive threats. And it's consistently just like 3 of the best offensive Pokemon in its category, in its type.
Right. And as we were talking, one thing I was sort of thinking about is I wonder how often we're going to see Lucario, because with some of these other top tiers of Coco, Halucha, if you're bringing Halucha, you're going to bring Coco most likely.
Right.
You're going to
Volcarona.
want to bring Latios and Volcarona most. And then, so that leaves only a couple spots left. And Lucario might not make it onto the team every week. So we're maybe going to be seeing the results of this Dragon Fairy Steel core every week.
Right. It's almost going to look like Quillfish or Sarina might take the role of most steel types because Quillfish is a better switch in to those fairies, and Sarina is a better switch in for like the potential like earthquake spam or whatever is going to try to get Tapu Koko. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how much his steel type actually works as a steel type, or if it's just another offensive setup Pokemon.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, we're going to look at Coach Chris and the Sutopolis Salamence.
Yeah, so that's Hydreigon and Kyurem as the dragons, the fairy and Togekiss, and the steel and Ferrothorn. Honestly, it's like this might be our best out of like checking all of the boxes. I think that like the fact that Cobalions were honorable mention and Seuss were honorable mention is just stupid. I mean, you get Ferrothorn, Togekiss, and Hydreigon is a very awesome, just bulky offensive, like threat. I don't know. It's like the best of UU and some of the best in OU. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting. I mean, I loved having Ferrothorn last season, so setting up spikes or stealth rocks for Hydreigon or Togekiss to come in, and we see like specs or Scarf Hydreigon really off. And I've definitely been destroyed by a nasty plot Togekiss. But we're also seeing things like a Wish Pass and Heal Bell Togekiss supporting Ferrothorn and supporting bulky. Um, and more of like a pivot Hydreigon with potentially like defog and a coverage move to support different Togekisses, or even Ferrothorn gets Swords Dance, and I would love to see Chris run a Swords Dance Ferrothorn kind of that I think. So
What if he could run it week 1 versus you?
We
got to get this out in time.
All right, we have our match tomorrow to publish it before then.
Yeah, I like that. I like too, real quickly, that Kyurem and Togekiss share that rock weakness, but like Kyurem doesn't really need to function as the dragon Pokemon on this team. It can totally just come in sometimes, not, and just alternate between these two depending on what the matchup allows for.
Yeah, I think it's great. So why don't we move on to our next coach, which is Coach Connor and the Mareeps. So this core, Megalodios, Azumarill, and then did we decide? Believe.
I mean, I think
Cobalion.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the core is. I wouldn't say on his team, Klefki functions as the steel type. It's cool and it gives him extra points. I don't think it functions as the fairy type too. Maybe in some ways because it has some of those cleric options. But like, I think the trio is Latias, Cobalion, Azu. I think it works as a offensive core with setup options, both specially and physically with Cobalion. You got a setup option specially with Latias and a setup option physically with Azu. There's just like great options there offensively, but also these 3 Pokemon. Oh, and like Klefki works amazingly as like dual screens into any of these. And there's also I think the cool perk also is these 3 work together as a potential balance bulky offense with maybe running the Perish Song Azu and Stealth Rocks Cobalion that can switch into most things, and then just like a stall balance build on Latias. Like 1 week, Connor could bring this Dragon Fairy Steel Core as the most offensive thing you can see. The next week, it can be defensive. And he's got that flexibility.
Great. I think that versatility really puts him up there on this list. And yeah, I'm excited. I know you said this already, but I do want to highlight just the role that Klefki plays in supporting this Dragon Fairy. I like to remind people that Steel Fairy is the best typing in the game. It's only weak to fire and ground. I think it has resistances, something ridiculous. And so, especially for Pokemon with Prankster, setting up spikes for being able to set up Thunder Waves so that Cobalion just click Swords Dance and not have to also click. Or again, Thunder Waves so that Azumarill can click things that aren't. I think these 4 really just synergistically work very well together.
Right. Yeah, it's 9 resists and 2 immunities.
Yeah.
Like over half the types. So, yeah, well, yeah. I think in the same way that I challenged Ian, who did I challenge? I challenged Ben in use the diversity that you drafted. I think also with Connor, it's going to be use the flexibility and diversity that you drafted because it's there.
Yeah.
And that's not we just listed 4. We just talked up hyped up 4 of the best Dragon Fairy Steel cores. None of those are 3 of them. We have okay, so number 4 is
It's me.
Punxsutawney Pachirisu. And this made the list as a little bit different than the other ones. It is highlighting specifically the defensive Dragon Fairy Steel core. So it's like he has a Dragon Fairy Steel core that is excluding Zygarde. With Tapu Fini, Druddigon, and Steelix, he's got 2 Stealth Rockers, he's got a Defogger, and Tapu Fini's defensive stats are incredible. Steelix defensive stats are incredible. Druddigon is one of the bulkiest defensive sort of dragon Pokemon with Mold Breaker. It can set up rocks on literally anything. And so this just like where the other ones definitely trended more offense. Oh, cool, dragons. This is a little bit more on that defensive side where you actually get to see all of the resists that dragon has, all of the resists that steel does, especially steel ground, and all of the like resists that like fairy or fairy water give a team.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. That's I guess that's mostly. I won't really say anything else. Yep.
Cool.
And,
all of these.
It also frees up Zygarde kind of do its own thing. Which
yeah. Zygarde isn't your dragon, and it's like if you're running Swords Dance, or I meant like Coil or Dragon Dance with 1,000 Arrows, it's like you're not even gonna run it. You don't even need to run a dragon move on it. So, like offensively, it doesn't. It can just be a ground type.
All right, but why don't we move on to
the best,
the best of the Dragon Fairy Steel cores, and this is truly the best of the best because we had 5 people. We have Coach Andy with the Virginia Wahoot Hoots with a core of Mega Diantha, Latios, and Celesteela.
Right.
Now, I said that Fairy Steel is the best typing in the game, while Steel Flying is the second best type. And it's backed up. Celesteela being one of the only flying types that doesn't have Defog, well, it's backed up by Latios, which is a gear, and Mega Diantha with Mega Diantha is one of the best mixed attackers in the game with base 1 each stat. And Latios is an incredible choice specs user, choice scarf user, Calm Mind, which Z user, which it looks like Andy did not, but it's has a lot of utility nonetheless. That makes it very, very separate from Mega Latios.
Right.
And Celesteela, we've seen what it can do in this league. With Leech Seed sets, with Autonomize, with Z moves, which again, Celesteela is not a Z move because show us all how good Gyarados is again.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see, so whenever you get secondary typings, you start to worry about whether or not they still function synergistically. So like I was saying before with Lucario being steel fighting, it starts to, and with Coco being electric fairy, you start to see some overlap that like part of what a Dragon Fairy Steel core does is that they don't have those overlapping weaknesses and stuff like that. And that's kind of embodied in this, like all of these have secondary typings. None of their secondary typings reduce the effectiveness of the Dragon Fairy Steel core that it has.
Right.
And,
like thinking about Latios switching in, like bringing a bulky Latios to switch in on the fire and electric moves from Celesteela switching in on steel moves from Mega Diantha, things like that. This core just works very well together.
Right. I mean, we spent so much time speaking about a core that speaks for itself. But yeah, that's how good it is. We're going to move on. We're going to go to the best fire, water, grass cores. And this one, we're back to the kind of the 3. Honorable mention here is Connor's team. I mean, they just came off. Yeah, they just came off of Dragon Fairy Steel honorable mentions and then picking up honorable mentions for Fire, Water, Grass
Yeah.
and
Burnick,
Infernape.
Azumarill, and Rotomo.
Right. And I mean, yeah, there's maybe Gorgeist in there, but kind of just highlighting these three and how synergistic they are. I mean, it's just a really cool um, combo of pivot option into setup, pivot option into setup, or like stealth rocks, defog, setup sweeper. So there's just some cool things going on in that combo, and it's like almost unnoticeable based on how cool the Dragon Fairy Steel Core is.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool that Connor had was both in the honorable mentions for best Firewater for best Dragon Fairy Steel Core. I
Yeah.
believe he is the only coach who made that. That's
Oh
pretty
yeah, you're
cool.
right.
Yeah. And
Next,
next up, we have the Baltimore with Heatran, Tapu Bulu, and his Quagsire and Alamola. So depending on which one he brings each week. Um, but Quagsire maybe. Heatran Bulu is a pretty common pairing
right,
we see in OU because Tapu Bulu's grassy terrain or ground type moves to Heatran. Also gives passive recovery because he is really bulky but doesn't have any recovery. Uh, and these three, and looking at like Quagsire and Alola, they really getting status, toxic, and so Heatran can kind of absorb both the Will-O-Wisps and the Toxics, which is really cool.
right. Yeah, it's like I mean maybe Quag and Aloe don't add to the core of Heatran Tapu Bulu in like an analytical sense, but on a stall team, they definitely add to that Fire Water Grass core.
Right, especially one having Regenerator, one having Unaware. Both of
Right.
those are really valuable.
Yeah. And like there's just so much health options there, whether it's recover with Quagsire or wish passing into Heatran and Bulu or grassy terrain. Um, yeah, there's just like a lot of defense built into that fire water grass.
Yeah. So why don't we move on to our Victor, this one who cinched the best Firewater Grass core, and that would be Coach with Houston Haxorus with a core Starmie and or Milotic, Virizion, and
Incineroar.
yeah, Incineroar. There aren't that many bulky fire types.
Right.
It's basically Mega Charizard X and Incineroar and maybe Torkoal if you count it.
Arcanine, Rotom Heat. Very
Yep.
few.
Okay.
Not everyone can grab one. That's for sure.
Right. So I think this is really cool to see a bulky fire type and a frail, fast water type. This strange pairing that we don't see very often. Starmie really, Starmie and Milotic do very well on this team together. I
Right.
think Ian will not be limited to bringing there each week, and I think they have very different utility.
Right.
And
I mean, you
they'll be
can.
effective.
Yeah, it's like they're almost not the same type based on how they're used. Milotic has such a different role than Starmie that almost similar to how like Zygarde has a typing that is not really dragon, but also dragon. Starmie, you don't draft Starmie for its water type. Um, you draft it for its rapid spin. You draft it for its like semi bulky offensive threat. And then yeah, I think that real core in Incineroar, Milotic, Virizion can live everything. Like you're not going to worry about your leftovers being knocked off of Incineroar or Milotic because you have this Defiant boosted Virizion. Um, I don't think there's any type over like weakness overlap as well, which is nice. So it's just cool. It's a good mid to low tier water grass core.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think it's great.
Very good
Uh,
value. Good value picks.
yes. Yeah. Great.
All right. Next
Um,
up,
to our
best alter
yeah.
best alternative type core. And once again, this could be, it doesn't have to be the three, it could be two Pokemon, whatever, but it's just more what typings work well together that aren't included in this list that we like the standard lists.
Right. So we'll start off with you, Kyle, and we'll start off with Mew Zapdos. And I think we spoke about this a little bit earlier with the defoggers, and what makes these Pokemon such effective defoggers is they're both so they can live anything. You can EV to live anything, and I think we've talked about this before. The Pixie Pokemon with the base 100s across. You might think that this means they're equally offensive and defensive, but based on the sort of like power shift in Pokemon, and based on where the average HP is, which is some 100, and the average, attack and special attack are maybe a little. I think the Pixie Pokemon wind up being much bulkier than they, and Zapdos is base 90s, base 90, base 85, base 90 on the defensive side. So also incredibly bulky, with really good typings, very
Right.
few things that are super effective and no over.
Mew is weak to 3 typings with Bug, Ghost, and Dark, and Zapdos is weak to 2 typings with Ice and Rock. And they both have quite a lot of resists, and Zapdos has that immunity. So yeah, I think that it's like, they're just, for 2 Pokemon that are likely going to come every week, that's like a good core typing, neither of which are Dragon, Fairy, Steel, or Fire, Water, Grass.
Right. They can both pivot into each other. They both can have defog. They can both offensive.
Right.
So I think they pair very well together. They're very synergistic. And I'll just offer a tip for beating this core, which is status. That's the way you beat Mew. It's the way you beat. Just watch out for Heal Bell from Florges. So I think you kind of pairing here.
All right. Well, before we give over too many tips, let's go to the second honorable mention, Las Vegas Venusaur with Mandibuzz, Mega Gardevoir, Conkeldurr.
Yeah, it was almost a shame to me to not include Jirachi on this list, just thinking about Jirachi, Mega Gardevoir as so cool together. But I think we Mega Gardevoir, Mandibuzz, Conkeldurr. We spoke earlier about the insane wall breaking ability of both and Conk. And then Mandibuzz serves as a slow U-turner to get them both in there. It can roost. I believe it gets toxic, knock off to get rid of leftovers and focus sashes and things. Defog to let them switch in and stay healthy.
Also, tailwind options. If you could tailwind U-turn into either of those Pokemon and double their speed, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, it is Psychic Dark Fighting, which is that weird, almost like inverse Z-axis typing that some teams have, most teams don't have.
Right. And I'll say, before Fairy typing was introduced, fighting Dark and the second core, there was Fire, Water, Grass, and fighting Dark, Psychic. And so they still function effectively, just now fighting and Dark share a weakness that they didn't, but they still work incredibly synergistically. And with something like Jirachi being able to, on those Fairy moves, I think there's in Roserade to be able to offensively switch in on those Fairy moves. I think it doesn't really suffer from a Fairy weakness.
No, not really at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost said last place, but the last we'll talk about, the first place for best alternative type core would be our other rookie coach, the Kalamazoo Kakunas. And the core that we recognized was Mimikyu, Tyranitar, Necrozma. It's like those. I almost can't, like, I guess it would be like Psychic, Dark, Fairy Ghost, um, as like this weird trio of four types that I think will work really well together. They will, like, I mean, even Tyranitar having that quad fighting, but then being resisted by the other two. And then there's like the quad, or no, there's only Necrozma is the only one weak to dark types. Um, but then you also have Tyranitar. So I think those are all bulky offensive Pokemon. Two of them have um, hazards, and all three of them have setup. And if you give them a free turn, you could lose.
Yeah, and I think the more I look at this, the cooler I think even just Tyranitar and Mimikyu together are. If you look at Tyranitar's stats, it's surprising that it doesn't get drafted. It's so bulky.
Right.
Base, even just regular Tyranitar, not even Mega, base 100 HP, 110 defense, 100 special defense. It's better than Mew, which we were talking about as an incredibly bulky Pokemon. You know, this isn't Mega Tyranitar, but Mega Tyranitar is and with Sandstream, Tyranitar's special defense is multiplied by 1.5. So it's 100, 110, 150. This is one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the game. So why doesn't it get drafted more? Well, that quad fighting weakness really comes into play, which Mimikyu particular good advantage of more than most ghost types because of its ability. And so you really don't want to give it an additional free switch in. You really want to make, if you hit that you actually are so that makes, I suspect that will make people even less likely to use fighting moves against this team.
I'm glad we opened up this season to having megas and non-megas drafted separately. I don't necessarily think it played out particularly in this the reason why like regular Tyranitar was drafted, but it's significant though that like the same season that we opened it up, we saw Tyranitar drafted, which might be one of the first times. I think all the other times it's been drafted as the Mega. So cool. I'm excited to see what those kinds of alternative typings do because I think they'll add to sort of the innovation of the league. We'll also see, like, are these alternative typings like some weird niche in the meta, or are they alternative because they're not the best? I think we'll end up finding out as the season progresses.
Yeah. So next up, we have the most offensive core. And our first honorable mention for best offensive core is Andy and Virginia Wahoo. And actually, this is quite overlapping. We're going to see we have best offensive core and then best defensive core. And we're going to see there could be some overlap with best Dragon Fairy Steel, best. And there's a reason for that. Why do we care about Dragon Fairy Steel cores? Just so happens they're generally very synergistically defensive. In this instance, they wind up being synergistically offensive. So he has Diancie, Latios plus setup. That could be Gyarados setup. That could be Celesteela setup. That could be Combustion setup. Could be Scrafty setup. I've already resigned myself to the fact that at least one coach this season is going to get swept by setup Combustion. Eviolite, Swords Dance, Speed. Even I think it gets roosted. It's going to happen, and I both excited and not excited. We also see just parting shot with Silvally to let some of this setup happen pretty easily. So this is sort of a callback to Andy's signature style with we saw Memento and Linoon a few seasons back. So pretty cool.
Right. And I think you'll see with all of our offensive cores, I guess the like asterisk that made it different than any of the other cores that we've mentioned would be that it's really two things that complement the rest of their team, or three things that complement the rest of their team. And so that core offensively of Mega Diancie Latios is cool, but what gives it that like X factor or that porch factor would be how it combines with the other offensive threats that Coach Andy has on his team. And another version of that would be the Punxsutawney Pachirisu's Nihilego Zygarde. These two types, I mean, how do you kill Zygarde? HP Ice or Ice Beam or stuff like that. And with the specially defensive kind of typing plus stats of Nihilego, these two work so well together. And I think it really adds. The core that I wrote down was Zygarde Nihilego something, because maybe one week it'll be Curse Mug. Maybe one week it'll be Life Orb Druddigon. Maybe one week it'll be Calm Mind Feeny or Choice Specs Rotom Heat or Nasty Plot Azelf. There's just so many. Or, I mean, we haven't even talked about his Mega yet. Mega Heracross this is its first season. I think this is a good team around it. I think Heracross is going to have a good go with either breaking for Zygarde or the inverse, and with getting those hazards in place with Nihilego. It's just a cool team overall. And I think that's why it's deserving of that honorable mention for best offensive core.
Thanks. I'm excited to use Nihilego defensively. It can kind of bite you in the butt if you're not careful, or if your opponent is running a mixed set. But with base 109 HP, base 131 special defense, yeah, I think it'll be fun. I think it'll allow for some situations to kind of appear on my team. So
great.
Yeah.
The best offensive core though overall, I don't know if you can imagine it or guess ahead, but it's totally this Tapu Koko Mega Latios
Volcarona.
And I mean, yeah, Coco Lucha.
Oh my gosh, Coco Lucha.
It's like these top three is a core plus something. It's like, God, is it Lucario? Is it Volcarona? It's just like everything is offensive on his team. There's nothing that is there's literally no passive Pokemon on this team. So
yeah,
it's like, is it a core of 11? Well, no, let's whittle it down. Let's just say it's Coco, Lottie, Coco Lucha, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a great team. And that offensive style. I mean, if you're trying to draft hyper offense and you don't win the category best offensive core, so I think he accomplished the vision with this draft.
All right. So next up, we have best defensive core, and back to form with some of the previous ones. 5 honorable mentions, and
5 honorable mentions,
and then a winner.
Wow.
And so kind of pair that with best offensive core. We just had like the 3 teams that we. So maybe this is sort of an indicator that we have a more league this season, which is interesting, sort of with the evolving Porch.
Right. And I think it's important to, like, as the meta shifts in our league, to, like, I don't know, give credit or credence to where that's happening. And I think we've had kind of an unbalanced defense in the league. There have been some coaches that have had these, like, oh my God, how do you beat that sort of thing? But I think the, like, where we've talked about hazards and where we've talked about defense, I think is where the league is maturing. So without spending too much time talking about each of them, because they're all awesome, we'll just kind of like highlight real quickly some of them. So number 1, Washington Hippopotas, first honorable mention, with Sylveon, Registeel, Tangrowth, Rotom Wash.
Yeah.
It's like, that's just obvious. Like, we've seen Tangrowth win because no one can kill it. We've seen Sylveon win because no one can kill it. We've seen the bulk of Registeel and Rotom Wash. So
yeah, it's great.
It's a good team.
I maybe have some concerns about overlap, or are you going to be able to bring all of those, or which one?
Right.
And I guess you'll definitely be able to pick and choose the right ones, but that would be maybe. And next up, we have the Orlando Magikarp with a Clefable Gliscor core. This is, sort of status, like Magic Guard and Toxic Orb. So you can kind of use these as status absorbers. They both have healing options. They both get Stealth Rocks. Gliscor gets Default, and Gliscor gets Pivot. They both. It's a pretty great defensive core.
Right, and there's other options to add, kind of like Lego piece add to that defensive core, whether it's, I don't know, Cloyster one week and Bronzong the next week, or Eviolite Girder, or Audino Wish Passing, so that Clef can be offensive. Like, there's so many other different ways, but I think just highlighting these two Stealth Rockers, two of the best, and their ability to live a lot of hits from a lot of different Pokemon is the reason why it made the list.
Yeah.
Next up, Houston Haxorus with we named it. There's a couple of defensive ones, but the ones we named were Skarmory, Incineroar, Milotic.
Yeah, this is great. We have Skarmory coming in on the Toxics from Milotic, and also setting up Stealth Rocks and Spikes to sort of, help out the other two. We have, Milotic, Refresh, and Incineroar obviously has Intimidate, which is you can imagine some situations where you sack Incineroar to intimidate, then come in with Skarmory and Wall, come in with Milotic and Wall. I think these three work really well together.
Yeah, and I think it'll couple with his potential offense. I don't know how much like straight up offense he has right out the gates, but when you have a defense of like Milotic and Skarmory, and then you have Intimidate options and a Dark type like Incineroar, like you can last long enough to do what you need to do offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. Up next, we have the Cobalions, and I know we talked about Muse Aptos as an alternative type core. It shows up here as a defensive core along with Mega Aggron. Guys, Mega Aggron is really bulky. It's really 230 defense, and it's just straight steel typing, so it's not quad weak to anything, and it's especially that everything that's super effective is only doing 75% of what it would do normally. It doesn't have
it's kind of the like Blissey of the defensive side.
Right.
Like with just this absurd one stat and then a good enough other stat that it's just hard to work around.
Right.
And it's gonna live one of everything.
Right. And we didn't even include in this defensive core, we didn't include Florges, which is wish passing to everything, which is heal belling the Toxics and the burn on Mega. I think, especially when you add Florges in here, this is a really impressive defense.
Cool.
Next up, how could we not include the Baltimore Braviaries, our stall team, on this defensive core list?
Yeah, so Sableye, Heatran, Bulu is very, very bulky. Adam, talk about him.
What else? What do we need to say? Almost. Sableye.
Right.
It's only weak, and can obviously recover pretty much anything. It's immune to status with Magic Bounce. Before you Mega Evolve, you can have Prankster, so you can get like a fast Will-O-Wisp off or something like that if you really want. And obviously, we talked before about why Heatran and Bulu kind of pair up. So I think together, this is going to be really, really tough. You think you finally get your check to Mega Sableye. Colin can just switch out every time. There's nothing you can do. Switch out to scare out your Fairy type. Switch out to Bulu sub setup. There's a lot you can do here. So,
right. I think we'll talk about it later, but Adam was definitely vying for this to potentially get the #1 slot for best defensive core. I have some reservations with Grassy Terrain being on a stall team that I'll get into later, but it definitely deserved a shout out. And final place for best defensive core, Getting the award is the Pseutopolis Salamence. Round 1, round 2 pick being Toxapex Ferrothorn. Tier 2 Toxapex for the first time since it was
it
banned up to Tier 1 for its defensive abilities. It's back down to Tier 2 to steal its... I don't know if it was round 1 or round 2. It was the wheel pick, so it doesn't matter. But to steal its cheap defensive abilities off the bat.
We lowered Toxapex. They were both Tier 2 initially. Our league is it APA? Is that right?
WBE. WBE is where we're from. I think Tangrowth was always Tier 3, but Toxapex was Tier 2. And yeah, that combo was too potent to just be like that point total of a Tier 2 and a Tier 3. So we moved Toxapex up. And then this past season, we moved Tangrowth up and Toxapex down to try to be the reworking.
Right. So we'll see here. It's interesting that Chris chose to go with Ferrothorn over Toxapex. And I know we've had Toxapex and Tangrowth period that was on Chris's team. Or was that Chris might have had Tangrowth and Tapu Bulu one season, if I'm remembering right. So I'm curious to see.
Yeah, that was the same. That was
right. So I'm curious to see how this is different with how Ferrothorn is functioning. And obviously, just between these two, we have Stealth Rock's spikes, Toxic spikes, Toxic. And neither of them can be Toxic, which is exactly what you want in a defensive core. Will-O-Wisp or no, Thunderwaves and Toxics and knockoffs and Scald Burns and things like that. Nasty Pokemon. So I'm excited to see what Chris does.
Right. There's a term that I'm blanking on, but it's basically the idea of being able to have multiple roles on a team. So in one team, you want to have offensive threats, defensive threats, clerics, pivot options, all these things. And the more one Pokemon can take multiples of those roles, the more free space you have. You only have so many resources in Pokemon. And so getting pretty much all you need out of a defensive core in just 2 Pokemon gives you 4 options to build in clerics, to build in more offensive threats. Like you could run like those 2 and then 4 setup Pokemon and win a lot of games. So yeah, I'm excited to see whether or not Chris ever has to win a game offensively, or if he can just win because nobody can beat Toxapex Ferrothorn.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of move into some of the sort of most subjective superlatives at the end here. So just to remind you what they are. Next is going to be check all the boxes. Then we have most tried and true, most innovative, and most improved draft. So I'll tell you about the first checks all the boxes team because it's you, Kyle, the Columbus maybe New York at some point.
Right. Well, yeah, a little bit of a spoiler. I mean, the reason we do this is because we like the boxes. The reason why we do the draft analysis. So both Adam and I are the honorable mentions for check all the boxes. So you talk about me for 20 seconds, and I'll talk about you for 20 seconds, and then we'll move on to the actual winner of this category.
Kyle, you have... I won't critique your speed tiers too harshly. I'd love to see something in the 110. But yeah, you have Greninja, Mew, Zapdos. You have a Wallbreaker, Darmanitan. You have you have a Heal Beller, a Wish Passer, and Florges. Stealth Rocker. You can also run optional Rain Team with side. Ursaring is cool with guts. It can absorb. Mega Aggron is just incredibly bulky, as we've spoken about before. And you also have a little bit of a Trick Room option with Alolan Executor and things like Slow Mew. So I really think this team has a lot to offer. And even if it, mentioned on everything, I think it's, there's a lot of good going on here. A lot of boxes being checked. One thing I would,
it's like,
I was going to
go on.
say, never never mind. I was going to say I would love to see more U-turn or Volt Switch, but I guess your top four, Greninja, Mew, Zapdos, Darmanitan, all have it. And so I think, yeah, you have a lot of the boxes checked.
It's like, I think it's like mid tier at least on most of the categories. And so sometimes it's like picking the Mario in a game. It's like, is it good to not be specialized in the best Dragon Fairy Steel Core? I mean, Florges, Como-O, who's my other one? Steel. Aggron is
Mm-hmm.
good. You know, Fire, Water, Grass, Greninja, Darmanitan, Executor is good. There's also Seismitoad. It's good. But it's like, if it's not the best at anything, but it's a jack of all trades, that could be the reason why it wins. It could also, we'll find out, be the reason why it loses. And I think kind of similarly but less is Punxsutawney's team. It's like hard to deny that Zygarde Feeny combo. It's hard to deny just all of the different pivot options, all the different hazard options, all the different ways to complement Zygarde and to build a team around it. So, in fewer words, it checks all of the boxes.
Great. And our winner for whoever the superlative for checks all the boxes is going to be Connor. So why don't you tell us a little bit, Kyle? What does this team do so well that checks all the boxes?
Right. It's kind of incredible how much overlap there is between Rotom, Gorgeist, this levitating eel, and Electrode have. Like, there's so much overlap, and yet there's an amazing Dragon Fairy Steel core, amazing Fire, Water, Grass core. There's a lot of flexibility with the speed tiers. You don't need to bring Electrode just to pivot. You can bring Alolan Persian. It's kind of a pretty defensive team, and to have this many Pokemon above base speed 100 on a defensive team like this is awesome. But it's not even just a defensive team; it also has those offensive options. It like has so much, and it's really because of key Pokemon like Klefki, key Pokemon like Rotom, Infernape, Cobalion, Megalodios that like really like I was saying before, like do so much as just one Pokemon that like he could almost win this award with those 5 or 6 if I want to include Azu. And then the rest have these like quirky things that I think Connor really likes. I think Connor likes to grab those weird Pokemon. And I think that he has some weird ones that can really balance well with the team that he drafted.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking.
The next one is most tried and true. Like we said, this is the one that kind of if you had an encyclopedic knowledge of Porch League seasons 1 through seasons 8, and then you said, what's good? These are like the Pokemon that you would draft, or the types of teams you would draft. And so, first honorable mention for most tried and true is Pseudopolis salamensis. We've seen combinations like Toxapex Ferrothorn before. I think we've seen Hydreigon, or no, we've seen Kyurem Togekiss before. We've seen, was it Zera Aura Hydreigon?
Yes, I think.
What did we saw? Yeah, I think we saw that. Yeah, we saw Meowstic used oddly and awesomely last season. We saw Mega Gallade's first appearance last season, and it showed up as like the thing that would sometimes bring Sean back from games. So I mean, yeah, I don't think Regigigas has been picked or been like used in a very notable way. And same with Alolan Marowak, but the other 9 are all very tried and true for our league.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be expecting you to bring those bulk up Zeraora sets.
Right.
And next up, speaking of the coach that does bulk up Zeraora, We have Ben and the Orlando Magikarp with a tried and true team. So we have things on here like Gliscor, which we see drafted all the time. Things like Cloyster, which one? Things like Clefable, which always go quickly. Girder and Bronzong, which are some lower tiers that we've seen be effective.
Vape Nation.
Yeah, we also have Ben's, return to form with Vape and Aldino. Yeah, Vape Nation and Aldino. I'm expecting that name to come back as well. Yeah, and I think just especially these, we've also seen things like Mega Charizard X, things like Specs Gengar, Scarf Gengar, and also some like Sticky Web Galvantula sets. And I believe Lurantis has had 1 or 2 seasons without too much note.
Right.
But there's a certain.
I think I won with it. That might have been one of the seasons I won. But yeah, I think is Zardex the only thing that wasn't drafted before?
Zardex has been drafted. I had it.
Okay. Oh yeah. Not as notable as Ben will use
right.
it, I'm sure. So literally all 11 Pokemon have all been drafted. They're all somebody's favorite. That's why it made the list for honorable mention.
Right. And again, I love this recipient of the...
Or not honorable mention.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The recipient of the most tried and true superlative is going to the Washington Hippopotas, Coach Brian T. Even though we see like some new appearances, like Mega Beedrill, that's the only new appearance I'm seeing. I know Porygon Z still had an appearance. But we're seeing things like Landorus T, like Rotom Wash, which Andy had that core last. Seeing things like Jellicent, which I know Brian ran into trouble with in the past. Seeing things like Sylveon and Tangrowth and Registeel, which are drafted every season for their sort of abilities. And even some of these, like a lower tier, like Cryogonal, is something we've seen quite a few times. And I believe that Coach Brian has had already once before. I think just overall, especially with the defensive core that we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of opportunity, or not opportunity, but just sort of kind of the sort of collective knowledge that we've all obtained and seeing what's really going to work. I hope it works for him again this season.
Right. And I guess I'll just highlight that, like, not only have all of these things been tried and true, but I think it's also like tried and true to Brian specifically. I think he's done pretty well with things like Registeel and Cryogonal, some of these low tiers, Mienshao, that he's found a way to fit them on a team that maybe make them seem undervalued. And so, yeah, I think it's especially when it comes to a draft like this one where so many people got sniped, being able to figure out, okay, what's happened? How do I like adapt? Like looking at the past and knowing what works is a good way to do it. So, yeah, good job, Brian. I think that this is a good, if I had to take a picture of like, what is the Porch League, it would be like a team like this, I think.
Yeah, and sort of counterposed to that, we have the most innovative team, and this is just sort of what is not necessarily innovative in the Smogon meta, but what is innovative in our draft meta. What types of teams have people not drafted before? So to start, we have our first honorable mention, I'm going to have to learn how to say this name. The Kalamazoo. The Kalamazoo Kakunas, is that right? Yeah. So looking at this team, we see a very sort of like heavy emphasis on this Trick Room option, with really slow wall breakers like Wishy Washy, like Mega Abomasnow, like Snore. And even some of these middling speed wall breakers, like Tyranitar and potentially Hitmonlee. We have Necrozma there to set Trick Room. We have Mimikyu to set up Trick Room. Cling Clang. Yep,
Cling Clang.
that's right.
Yep.
So I think, and it's interesting to me because we have this really kind of low team with then Ninjas on the top. So you have, speed boost, swords dance. That base 90 attack is actually not anything to scoff. That's scoff 10 less than Zygarde. So I think this is a really interesting team, and it's very different than a lot of ones that I've seen.
And it gets Swords Dance, which Zygarde
Right.
doesn't get. Yeah, I think you're right to point out that Trick Room option. I'll be curious to see where his I guess where his wins are coming from if it's not from that Trick Room option. I guess they're still like his just alternative core with Necrozma, Mimikyu, and Tyranitar. There's still a lot of bulky offensive options, so I'm not in any way disregarding that, but it looks like there are going to be some teams that are going to try to prep for Trick Room and still won't have a way to be like, I guess I'll do this or something.
Right. Yeah, especially with having those 3 wall breakers and Mega Bomb Snow Wish able to be kind of mixed wall breakers, which is really cool. Next up, we have Coach Sean and the Venusaurs.
Yeah, he kind of I feel like last year he went for, if this was a category that he knew about, I think he tried to do something innovative last season, drafting Mega Glade and trying to work around it. There was just something about it that wasn't right, and I think he got whatever that was right this time. I think it was the first 4 rounds he still didn't draft a sensible core, and by sensible I just mean a traditional core. And so if he is able to make Conkeldurr work in this way, I'll be very excited and very impressed, because I do think that it's very, very innovative to build around Conkeldurr, something that hasn't been drafted before, and drafting it first round and trying to build around it, almost reacting, because all the things that are normally round 1 picks are now being picked, and so round 2 picks are coming out of the way.
Right.
So,
and I think something noteworthy is that this is the first season in at least a couple of seasons that Sean hasn't been sniped in the first few rounds. I know he said he got sniped a little bit in the later rounds, but his core it's clearly intact with Conkeldurr, Jirachi, Mega Gardevoir. And I think that it's very interesting, but I like it a lot. So I'm excited to see.
Yeah. So good job. On to the most innovative, capital M, most innovative team. How
the
could
Braviaries. Hey. We've never had a stall team. This has been 8. So we've had well over, what would that be? Probably close to 100 drafted in our league at this point, and none of them have been a stall team until now. You see.
Right. I mean, to clarify, I was telling Adam this when we were prepping for this. We've had people win with stall, and we've even had people trade to make their teams more stall-like. But nobody's just drafted a stall team.
Right. In a lot of cases, it's been maybe in the way that we've had rain teams where it's really a rain option, maybe 4 Pokemon supporting rain core. We've had 4 Pokemon supporting a stall option. But I think this team is really built around the idea of stall, and this team will bring stall every week.
It's stall with it's stall with a balanced support. It's I could run Cresselia, Heatran, Tapu Bulu, Crobat, I don't even know, Rotom Frost, and then a Calm Mind Mega Sableye or something like that. But that would be that alternative rain team that some people had. This is mainly stall with an alternative, kind of more offensive team.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's great. I know, Kyle, you're going to talk later about your Tapu Bulu reservations on. Yeah, I think overall it's really stepping out into somewhat uncharted territory for our league, at least. And so I'm excited to see how you do it, Colin, and I'm excited to see how people play against it. I'm not excited for those 103 turn and
Yeah.
logging my phone logging me out uh, the just the watching the match.
These will be great
Yeah,
replays to watch. Um, yeah, it is 8:54 p.m. and I'm actually playing him in 6 minutes. In the next 6 minutes, we will talk about the most improved drafts, though. First up, most improved is
the
Anchorage Ninetales, Brian Schmidt. And with these, I'm going to pull up last season's just so you can see what we're talking about. So, um, okay, so there is Brian's team last season, and like we were talking about before, he this season was very split between offense types or sides. Last season, it was like all offensive, physically offensive, plus Cresselia and Blastoise. And that really, I think, hurt him, and it made building pretty difficult. Whereas this season, I mean, it's funny because he has Mega Blastoise now too, but there's like a lot more variety, a lot more ways to make his top tiers
right,
shine. Kieran Black is a first round pick. Mega Lopunny is also a first round pick, but this is a team that works for Kieran Black. Whereas I don't know, like just theoretically, analytically, how much this team is working around Mega
right.
Lopunny.
Um, yeah, and I think especially with this sort of being heavily physical last season, and drafting a mixed wall breaker first round is really great. So yeah, great job on that. One of our most improved drafts.
Right.
Next up, we have Zootopolis Salamences. Can you pull up the season 8 Salamences team?
Yep.
Yeah,
Right there.
so if we look at the Salamences last season, so you look at his team at the end of the season.
Let me move it over. Yeah, let me move it over
Right.
slightly. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, looking at his team at the end of the season is a little bit different than at the beginning. Traded out Mega Manectric for he had Mega Charizard Y, traded it for Mega Manectric. Had a Zelf and a Alolan Executor, and I can't remember what those. Lapras was one of those trades. There's another one as well,
Yeah.
but just sort of at the beginning, there was a lot of type between like Heatran and Mega Charizard Y, and Manton. There were quite a few grass types. There's Leafeon and Decidueye and
Exeggutor,
right,
Decidueye,
as
yeah.
Zelf and Esp with a low top speed of 150. And so I think mostly because of that overlap improvement that happened during the trade. And obviously we saw Chris do very well in the playoffs. So let's, why don't we flip over to this season? Yeah, I think it's clear, just like really for Ferrothorn and Toxapex, followed by the Dragon Fairy Steel Core that we highlighted in Hydreigon, Togekiss, and Ferrothorn. There's a lot to really love about this team, and I don't think it needs trades to get any better.
Yeah, that's a great point. Last season after the draft, I was like, if this has one or two things that were flipped, I could see this being really cool. And this time it's like, yeah, this is good. I don't have any off the top of my head right now recommendations for what could make this team better. As the season progresses or as I am more familiar with the team, there might be some opinions that I have, but like I think this is a great improvement from last season.
And our recipient of the most improved draft sort of award. It goes to our coach Sean of the Las Vegas Venusaurs. And why don't we look at the
Woo!
Yeah, heck yeah. Why don't we look at the season 8 list? And Sean is also somebody who made a lot of trades. We saw his team get much better as the season went. Why don't you talk about it?
Yeah, I mean he had all good Pokemon that didn't seem to like jive together. Magnezone, Alolan Muck, Buzzwole, Mega Gallade. Just these things that are like, is this good? Yes. Is it good next to this? Probably not. He had some options for potential rain, and then other like a rain Pokemon, but not really rain other thing. There's just like, I think like the similar with Chris, his team, the team that he ended up with at the end was good. But the draft itself needed a lot of work. And so switching over to this season, it's like also like great. Like he just did exactly probably what he wanted to do, which like, dang, last season I really tried and didn't get the results I wanted. And it seemed like he went, let me try again, and then hit the ball, you know? Like it wasn't just like doing the same thing and getting the same results. He did had a similar thing, went at it from a different angle, and I think it like worked out really well for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sort of concurs superlatives list. Do we have time to go through the team grades, or do you need to hop off and play your match?
Yeah, let's take a little bit of a break, and not for you guys. For you guys, it'll bleed right into our team analyses that are going to be short because we just talked about all the teams. So just like a little bit of a quick overview of each of the teams. And like we said, we're going to do it in the graded order, ending with what we think is the best team. So stick around. All right, welcome back. This is the part 2 of the podcast. Here we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into each team and maybe talk about some of the things that didn't come up when we were talking about the superlatives. And we're going to do our best to try to limit our time to 3 minutes per team, just because I know we spent a lot of time on the first half. And then so the second half, if we do 3 minutes per team, that'll keep us under an hour. And we thank you all for listening. So the first team we are going to talk about, and then after we talk about each team, we'll give a grade. The first team we'll talk about is Coach Mason's Kalamazoo Kakunas. So Adam, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I mean, this team's definitely interesting. I think there's like a lot of options that we pointed out earlier, especially with Mimikyu Tyranitar. I'm pretty skeptical, if I'm going to be honest. The speed tier is mostly following 100 and like base 100, and with Flygon and base 79 with Necros. And I know we talked about there's a Trick Room option, but there's such a big speed gap between 61 and 30. I know there's a lot of a 45 to 60 speed tier range. So I'm nervous that some of the wall breakers will be outsped, not under Trick Room, but then Pokemon that normally benefit, like Tyranitar or like Necrozma, aren't actually be that effective.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's sort of what I'm doing.
There's a little bit of pivot, Flygon and Kling Klang, but that's really it. I think it's going to be a lot of like hard switches and stuff to try to gain momentum, and to try to make sure that you get that Trick Room going, and stuff like that. So there might be some difficulty.
Not
there.
Really very many hazards. Right. Just Flygon and Kling Klang, potentially, I guess Tyranitar.
Yeah. Necrozma.
Not much. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Necrozma. Okay, but and then like in terms of hazard removal, I guess you have Hitmon. I think it's pretty limited, and so I think it's going to be Flygon, Arcanine, Mimikyu, Tyranitar, Necrozma most weeks.
Right.
And then, so I don't know. That's sort of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's one thing that we want to try to do, and we didn't do it for this first one, but we'll try to for each one, is also kind of recap what we just saw. So, I mean, Mason did win the honorable mention for most innovative and won the category alternative type core. And so, while this is the lowest in our ranking, there's still some use here. There's still some utility. Like, I mean, I don't ever recommend him doing this, but if he wanted to set up turn one with Mimikyu, he could win some games. Like, there's still an offensive pressure here, and there's still some things going for it. And yeah, I think it's. I mean, it's
think.
objectively a better team than I drafted my first season as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Me as well. And I think there's a lot of potential here. I'm just skeptical, and I'd like to see how it. So I gave this team a C grade.
Right. I gave it a C as well.
All
And
right, so that's
so the next team, who do we got here?
That would be Brian S and the Anchorage 9 tail.
Right, yes. And Brian got honorable mention for most improved from last season, and also won the category physical special split. And all this is true. I think that it would be. I think you'd be thinking about it the wrong way if you're like, oh wow, this is the 12th place team. Like it must not be that good. I think it just points to just sort of the synergies that are working with some of the other teams because this is a solid team. And especially with those Z captains, especially with what's going on all around, like he's going to be a huge threat in the Moon Conference. And depending on how some key matchups goes, he could have a solid win rate. Did he win one during regular season and one
I believe that's right.
postseason? Yep. Yeah. So I mean, especially with the most improved category, I think that he's set up in a good place to continue that growth. Miss Magus can break well. Raikou can break well. Talonflame can break well. Kyurem can break well. Celebi can break well. So there's like a lot of breakers on his team, and there's a little bit of a defense. I think that's kind of maybe why for me I ranked it lower. Maybe there's some speed tier questions that you can get into, but for me, just thinking about like, is it Blissey Metagross? Is it Blissey Blastoise? Blastoise wasn't the best for him last. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the best. So is he just going to be relying on that wish pass from Blissey to keep his things healthy? But yeah, the offensive pressure is there.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I'll add is one thing this team does have going for it is some pretty good rockers with Metagross and Nidoqueen both having like physical or special offensive presence, and we know. I guess it's just unfortunate with the sort of rockers in the league or the other sort of teams in the league. Brian's going to be pressured to do Pokemon like Talonflame and Kyurem Black needing to come in. And we don't see, I guess, Mega Blastoise has rapid spin. And so we're going to be probably seeing that quite a few times, I would expect. I don't know. That's, one thing I would point out. For speed tiers also, we see like a little cluster between base 78 with Mega Blastoise and base 70 with Metagross, which is unfortunate, especially because that's where a couple wall break with Blastoise, Nidoqueen, Metagross, and Absol.
Right.
So I would consider that like an unfortunate like speed tiering kind of cluster there. So yeah.
Another thing is there's like Oh, sorry. Another thing real quick. There's like that gap between 95 and 78. Like Mega Blastoise, in order to be as fast as it can be, it tops out at 181. And things that are at base speed 91 or higher can run like Adamant and Modest natures and still outspeed that Mega Blastoise and Nidoqueen range. So things like Landorus T sit in that range. Crocodile. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, what was the grade you gave it?
Yep. So I gave this team a C plus.
Yeah, me too. I think it's offensive pressure really keeps it alive, and I gave it a C plus as well.
All right. The next team that we have, this is so that was rank 12. So the next team we have is Coach Brian Tim and the Washington Hippopotamus. Brian won in our superlatives. The first half won most tried and true. Best was a honorable mention for defensive core and speed tiers as well. Some of my favorites. I think it's noteworthy that we have so tried and true Pokemon like Tangrowth and Land, and just that we just have so many higher ranked teams. And I think that's just a testament to sort of how much better our teams are getting as we continue to improve as a league. So that's something that's really. I guess looking at this team again, we have at the top speed tiers with Mega Beedrill, Salazzle, and Fast Cryogonal, kind of a rock weakness. I think that's something that this team suffers from. I mean, luckily Landorus is always a great switch in. Things like Registeel or Tangren on rock moves. But I think even just like getting is easy for opponents to do, and something that's going to hinder this. I like the pivoting options with Landorus and Rotom, and while there's maybe a rock weakness, there's also like some good defog ability. Like pivot into defog, and especially it's nice with Tangrowth to have Regenerator out and then pivot into Tangrowth.
Right.
From things like Rotom Wash, who maybe don't want to get like a Grass Knot or something. Or yep.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried that the offense isn't defensive enough and the defense isn't offensive enough. I feel like it could be pretty easy to sit on your haunches with Sylveon and click Wish and Protect, or click Wish and go into something else and hope that it doesn't die before receiving the Wish. And Registeel kind of is like a lump, and sits there and statuses things and is annoying, but I think its offensive pressure is hard to be realized. And so it's kind of like you look at his team and you go, okay, that's on defense. Okay, that's on offense. And he might be having troubles with that. On a positive note, though, I think that like his threats are absolute threats. And I mean, you can see just because we're recording this later in the day, he lost 0-3 to Andy's team. But if you watch the replay, like he was one turn away from just sweeping with Salazzle or something like that. So there's a lot of potential for this team, and I think with a coach like Brian, he can do really, really well with it.
Yep. Great. So, and I guess one more thing I'll say, we maybe talked about this a little bit, but yeah, just some like utility overlap. Sylveon and Tangrowth, like, maybe you're not going to, it's going to be hard, even though you might want to run both of them, since they're both sort of doing similar things. Same thing with Registeel, things like Justin and Rotom Wash. Things like Cryogonal and Rotom Wash, even. So I would say that's something I have a little bit of trepidation about as well.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, all in all, though, I think it's a good team. I think he's a good coach for it. Maybe it's important. I gave it a C plus.
I gave it a C.
You gave it what?
A C plus as well.
Yeah, it glitched out when you said plus. So we both gave it a C plus, and it's just important to note that like the rank of your team isn't some power ranking of where we think coaches are going to place or anything like that. There might be teams like, I think this is a good example of a team that maybe in the abstract we tried to take the coach out of the equation. So I think this is a good team for Brian. We didn't rate The analysis is just of the 11 Pokemon, though, not of the
Yep.
coach.
Right.
So, the next coach won Best Fire, Water, Grass Core and got honorable mention for Hazard Setting Removing and Defensive Core. So, 4 categories they were nominated in and won one of them. It is the Houston Hacksters, coached by Coach Ian. Tell me about him.
Yeah, so this team it reminds me a lot of my Season 5 team, which I absolutely loved after the draft and I hated at the end of the season. And I hope I'm wrong about this. But what I felt like at the end of my season is that this team works really, really well as a team of 11. If I can bring all 11 Pokemon every week, then it's going to. But I could never pick 6 that were going to work. And so I'm a little bit nervous when I look at this team that you're going to have a similar problem where, maybe like where is your offense coming from? Like your fast Pokemon like Excelgor and Starmie can be offensive. Like, Specs is definitely a set or like analytic Starmie or something. But I'm a little nervous that, neither of these, for example, like you can run Earthquakes for Incineroar, Luxray, Dragalge, but then they're taking out Starmie and Excel. Things like that, I guess. I'm a little nervous. I think Mamoswine is really good on this team as a breaker and sort of has good typing with the rest of your team. Again, I'm just nervous that, maybe you have Starmie and Mamoswine. And I don't know. I'm just curious to see how you're able to build up your teams.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that, what I'll call like lack of pressure out the gate. It's like Virizion could be it if you choice bandit, or Excelgor could be it if you choice specs or life orbit. Same with like you almost need that life orb or that expert belt or something just to get off that, or that choice to item just to get off that damage you need right away. Otherwise, you're relying on that kind of momentum or pivot options with Volt Switch or U-Turn or Whirlwind to get you in the right situation to click that setup move. If you can get the setup move off with this kind of team, the Dragon Dance on Altaria, the Swords Dance on Virizion, then something crazy is going to happen. But yeah, I think that it's not defensive enough to be stall, and it's not offensive enough to be considered bulky offense. It's kind of just bulky.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just point out, looking at the special attack stats here, Mega Altaria has the highest special attack stat on this team. And next is Milotic and Starmie and Excelgor. And if you look on the physical side, if you take out Mamoswine, then it's Luxray, which I think is tier 5, is the highest physical attacker.
Yeah.
And then Incineroar, which is usually run to, and then Mega Altaria. So yeah, like you're saying, not very many like wall breakers or like pressure right out.
Right, and there's like some masking in that with abilities like, is it analytic that Dragalge gets?
And I think,
or adaptability.
Yes, Starmie gets analytic as well. Dragalge
Right.
gets adaptability.
Adaptability, something like that. So there's some things, and there's like typings. Like Mamoswine doesn't have like it's offensive, but it's more offensive than I think its base stats suggests, just because its offensive ice ground is so impressive on the meta. So like in general, it's a cool team. Like it got all of those superlatives or mentions, like we talked about, getting the hazard removal, hazard setter, defensive cores, and firewater grass, and it won firewater grass. So there's definitely a lot here. And that's why for me, I gave it a B minus.
And I gave it a B minus. Well, hey, we're 4 for 4 so that's kind of
With what? Oh, with the
noteworthy.
yeah, we did.
We've given the same grades. We tried
Well,
to come up with them separate. This is pretty exciting, actually.
right. The next one is the coach that checked all the boxes. Also got um, nominated or honorable mention for both Dragon Fairy Steel Core and Firewater Grass Core. Adam, who is it?
Uh, Coach Connor and the Irish Mareeps.
Yeah.
This is a cool team. I am very excited about Star Raptor being drafted. I think it'll be. I think Z parting shot, which fully heals the Pokemon that's coming in. It's going to be really, really cool to see with something like set up Megalodios or something like Dur or Azumarill or whatnot. I think this is really a team to let Alolan Persians shine. And I like the speed tiers. I like them pretty well. I think there's maybe something lacking, but I think all in all, it's pretty good.
Yeah, the reason why this for me is collectively our ninth is just because of all that overlap in the bottom. I think Electros, Gorgeist, Rotom, Electrode. There's just too much. That's 4 Pokemon that all kind of like sit somewhere very close to each other if there was a Venn diagram. And so if I prep for 2 of them, am I prepping for 4 Pokemon? And so I think using your trades early, or using your trades once you figure out which Pokemon you like the most, but ending the season with some of those switched around, this could easily leapfrog half of the teams on the list for me because of how much I like that Dragon Fairy Steel Firewater Grass core.
Yeah, and just again, that's Azumarill, Sword of Clef, Cobalion, Megalodios, Infernape, Rotomo / Gorgeist.
Right.
It's a really solid 7 Pokemon, I think, and especially when you throw Star Raptor in there too.
Right.
So I gave this team a B.
I gave it a B too.
All right. Our next coach won Best Defensive Core, and they were an honorable mention for Dragon Fairy Steel Core, Most Tried and True, and Most. This is Coach Chris of the Pseudopolis Salamence. Kyle, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean we're getting towards the middle of our draft of 13 coaches. This is kind of like what I would consider mid-tier, but I think that like all of these teams are somewhat viable. So mostly this is a good team. Like there's not really much that I can like, I guess I don't want to say critique, but there's not like many suggestions where it's like as simple as like, oh, I don't like Mudsdale or something like that. I think for me, the proof will be a little bit in the pudding for how well something like Ferrothorn Toxapex works alongside these setup options. I think that it'll be a lot about positioning with this kind of team, and if he wins positioning, then he'll win games. Yeah.
I think for me, one thing I keep looking at is just Kyurem and Hydreigon. Just keep wondering what is Kyurem's role on this team. Obviously as a scarf, but Hydreigon, just the difference between base 98 speed and base 95 speed, being able to outspeed things like a lot of those, base 95's Gliscor really matters a lot, even if you're below base 100. And so I think, I don't know, for me, that's something that's pulling this team down a little bit, but it's still, I mean, it's excellent. and we've barely talked about Mega Galate. The last pick overall, so kind of exciting.
Right.
Yeah, Mega Galade, Zero Aura, both of are really offensive, and then to have sort of this wall,
Right.
or these two walls in Toxapex and Ferrothorn here at the end.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a challenge for teams to handle the walls of Toxapex Ferrothorn. And you better do that because like the longer the game lasts, the more things like Mega Gallade can just like turn 45, click a Swords Dance, click bulk up, click substitute, and then just start taking the rest of the Pokemon. Or even like Specs Kyurem or Specs Life Orb Hydreigon. So yeah, I think I would consider this team overall really good, with a little bit of top heaviness. I don't like Meowstic or Regigigas or Mudsdale as much as I like, and maybe even Alolan Marowak. We just haven't really seen it that well on in our league yet. The top of his team is sweet, and that's why I think it deserves a solid B.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I gave it a B as well.
So we've
and again, that's rank 8,
right
for
right, and we've stayed consistent. This is actually the next pick is the first time that we had some disagreement on. And I like this. I think this was in maybe like my top 6 teams, and this was more like 8th or 9th for you, but together average out to 7th place. Wait, was this my 1, 2, 3? This is my 4th overall, but together,
Oh,
yeah, together is our 7th overall pick, winning best hazard setters, getting mentioned in physical special split and defensive core. This is your coach, Ben. I just like these kinds of
hey.
teams. This is like how I liked Ben's team last season. I liked Ben's team this season. These just look more like teams that I draft, that are more balance heavy, maybe bulky offense, but really riding on that like balance semi-stall wave. And I think that for me, it feels like I think I said in some sort of chat that this is like a realization of how Ben drafts. Um, so
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely with the return of Vape Nation, and picking up Aldino and Clefable. So we know there's going to be some wish passing among those three to things like maybe Charizard X, to Gliscor, to things like Defensive Cloister, which I think has a really good opportunity on this team to be run. Things like Bronzong, which don't. The only reason it's tier 3 and not tier 2 is, well, for a lot of reasons, but it doesn't have recovery. So
right.
being able to wish pass to it is, so
The only
yeah, I mean,
what's the but? Because I gave this a higher score than you. So where's your but?
yeah, I think the but for me is just like the amount of overlap, like we said with Vaporeon, Clefable, Audino. So that amount of overlap, and plus I just look at this team and I say there's not a lot that I'm scared of, which
Right.
maybe I'm underestimating things
No,
like
I think
Specs Gengar, but
when we met up and talked and gave our ratings, I think you kind of talked me off the ledge that I was on, because it's like Gengar and Charizard X are the only things that are like, when I'm team building, I have to go, I need something that can switch in immediately or I lose. Um, and
great.
and everything else you can kind of like maybe have a slower response to. Um,
Right.
so
I think Cloister is something that, again, we do very well in our league. Just this past, I think it's actually a little bit easier to prep for, since the offensive variants of Cloister
right,
are pretty easy to prep for, as long as you have a Pokemon on your team that's able to handle that.
right,
If you don't, then that's sort of its own issue, right? And that's like a team composition error.
right,
In general, I don't think it's as hard to prep for as Mega Charizard X and Gengar. And
Right.
so for me, I mean, this perfectly plays into Ben's style, which is, yeah, that sort of like semi-stone. I'm sure like Hazard's doing very well for him, status doing, so
Yeah.
I'm excited. I personally would like to see more of the offensive pressure, but I think
Right. Really quick on speed tiers as well. 3 Pokemon base 100 or higher. Very Edgequake weak, so Stone Edge and Earthquake go in on this team. So and like 110 being your fastest, you can easily get like a middling Pokemon that has some oomph behind it, to like you choice scarf it and just spam Earthquake, and you can do a lot to a team like this.
right, absolutely. So for all of those reasons, I gave this team a B minus actually.
Yeah, and I gave it a B plus. I think I was willing to be talked down a little bit, and I was definitely by the time we had a conversation about all these Pokemon, or all these teams, I was confident putting it at our 7th place in the draft.
Mm-hmm. So next up, this coach won the superlative for most innovative. They also were an honorable mention for best defensive core, fire, water, grass core, and hazard removal. This is which?
This is Coach Colin and the Baltimore Braviaries.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, we've talked with these high ones. I feel like we've already said a lot about them because they were mentioned a lot. So this is an example of a team that we talked about. What, 4 times? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 times. I can't think of too much to say about any of the boxes that it didn't win. I will use a little bit of this time to talk about that little skepticism I have of Tapu Bulu being on a stall team. I would say like the theory behind stall is that like you want to get reliable recovery for yourself and deny recovery for your opponent. And while grassy terrain is giving your team reliable recovery and it's nerfing earthquakes and things like that, it's doing the same for your opponent. So if it would take 40 turns, it might take 70 turns. That is theoretical. I don't really have much to back that up. I think that there's a lot of cool things on this team that like kind of make it like stall with an asterisk. That being one of them. Another one is having Ditto. So a way to break stall is to like call mind up a bunch and then break through everything. But you gotta worry about doing that with Ditto or Swords Dance or Nasty Plot. So Ditto is a good setup counter to have. Just he doesn't even have to bring it, and you have to prep as if you won't be able to lose to yourself if he copies your Pokemon.
Right. For me, I like this team because, and I think in a lot of ways, it's really built around. We see one thing you struggled with last season with Bulu is sort of having a fire. So it's great that Heatran can come in, take those fire moves.
Right.
We see Mega Sableye and Crobat. Crobat's incredible. It's great because it's immune to toxic. And so it's nice that it can sort of on like the earthquakes that Heatran doesn't want. It can come in on the fighting moves that Heatran doesn't want. So I think I really like that about this. Crobat also is really cool. I think it gets Super Fang. And so on a stall team, I think super is a very useful move to kind of like cut down walls more quickly or kind of break through defenses a little bit.
Right.
That people weren't expecting to happen.
Also, like part of stall, you think of things like Chansey and Blissey. Chansey and Blissey are cool because they have that special defense stat, and they have that that heal bell cleric support. Um, his highest special defense is Cresselia, which is awesome, but doesn't get that cleric support. He's looking at that from Miltank. So having his besides Sableye being able to bounce back certain things, the only thing that's like stopping his team from being toxic down, which is the worst thing for stall teams, would be a Miltank. Um, which isn't bad. It's just not amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
that's for me why I gave this a B.
And I gave this team a B as well.
Nice.
That is our number 6.
Nice. So top 5. Here we go. Number 5 won, or was nominated for best alternative type core. Was nominated for best defensive core. Was nominated for checks all the boxes and won hazard removal.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me about the Columbus Mercrew?
Yeah. This is and just so I don't know if you guys can kind of see on the graphic that is up on the screen, but we did rate our own teams. So I rated Kyle's team a B, a pretty solid B. This is kind of where it sits for me. It's cool as for reasons that we mentioned before. Basically, this defensive core of Mew, Zapdos, Mega Aggron, winning the hazard, pivoting around a lot, and then getting in Como-O and clicking Dragon, getting in Greninja and clicking Specs Hydro Pump, getting in Darmanitan, clicking Flare Blitz, even like getting in something like Ursaring and clicking like a Guts boosted Facade. I just think this team has a lot of good pieces that kind of fit nicely together. And I think it sort of fit. Not that Kyle has a specific play style he usually plays, but I think this is something that he'll be able to utilize pretty effective. And I'm excited to see it. I do think it is a little top heavy. Looking at like Greninja, Mew, Zapdos, Darmanitan, Coco, Florges. And I know you have things like Mega Aggron and Seismitoad, but I really think that Pokemon like Ursaring, Alolan Executor, and Aromatisse I think are really not going to make very many appearances, and I know are sort of excited about this potential Trick Room option you have, but I don't know how much. I don't know. I'm just skeptical about the offensive pressure you have with Trick Room versus in your higher speed tiers, like things like Darmanitan and Como-O, and Greninja. I guess I don't think you're going to bring Trick Room very often, and I think your lower tiers are going to be kind of unused. So that's sort of why I rated you as B. Do you have anything you'd like to say about your team?
I think that's fair. Obviously, everyone likes their own team. I went through a season though where I really loved my other team, and then by the end of the season, I hated it. So I'm like humbly accepting that there's probably parts to this team that I don't see yet. I really kind of like my favorite Pokemon are Pokemon that can flex either to defense or offense, can be supportive or like central. And I hope that I can bring a team where 1 week it features Greninja, the next it features Mew, the next it features Zapdos, the next it features Como-O, Seismitoad gets a nod, Florges gets an offensive nod, Zapdos gets a nod. Like just where it could be like, oh, okay, well if I need Mew for offense, well, these 5 can be defense or whatever it is. So that's the hope. We'll see how it is. I'll take top 5.
All right. Our next coach is the coach who won Most Improved Draft. And they were nominated for Alternative Typing, Alternative Type Core, Most Innovative, and the Physical Special. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Sean's Las Vegas Venusaur?
Yeah, for me, I don't really care too much about Stoutland, Shiftry, and Hoopopotas. or really Gastronaut. But I think it still deserves mention up near the top because of Conkeldurr, Mandibuzz, Roserade, Jirachi, Mega Gardevoir, Lycanroc, and Jolteon. I think that right there is incredibly solid. I may not be a believer of those low tiers or the potential sand option, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how Sean rises to the occasion with this type of team. You got three Pokemon sitting at base 80, but I mean, one of those is Stoutland, which is going to be on a sand team, sitting up here a lot higher. Mandibuzz, you're not trying to run all that speed. Shifter, you might not bring too much, so there might be a decent gap here. I rated that, I think, a little bit more critically than Adam on my first look. But I gave this team a B.
Yeah, I think the speed gap between base 80 and base 45 is a little bit of an issue. However, this is the offensive team, and I know people are going to be worried about outspeeding Scarf Jirachi and outspeeding Mega Gardevoir. And I think some of the scary threats, like Rose, sits in a nice speed tier. Conkeldurr, again, this is our sort of first season seeing it, and I think there's a lot of buzz about it in the off, potentially moving it down to tier 2, and then it was drafted in the first round as a tier 1. And so to see, what it does. Look for Sand is going to boost its special defense, and then also with Hippopotas. So user, it has its splintered storm shards. It's a unique theme. I would say look out for that as well. Don't sleep on that. So I don't know. I like this team a lot.
Adam, you cut out a bit, but I'm assuming you said you like this team a lot and it deserves fourth.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have any other, I was just going to say I rated this team a B.
You rated this team a B plus. I rated this team a B, and that one and Ben's team, I think, were the ones that we had the biggest disagreement on. I think I named my butts, but I think it definitely deserves the mention in the top 5. These top 3 for us, I think, are really strong, and so I think for me they're the top 3. They are clearly the top 3 teams. We might have a disagreement in the discussion, but the number 3rd overall, nominated for best offense, offensive core, and it won the category Dragon Fairy Steel, is Coach Andy, the notorious ELO champion, Virginia Wahootoos. And I think Mega Diancie, Celesteela, Latios, we can talk about forever. We can talk about Gyarados forever, and Combustion, and Scrafty, and this is just a very Andy team. And he's going to, I think another very Andy thing is he's going to win a game with each of his low tiers that you're not prepped for because you put all of your resources in those top tiers. Shaman's going to win off of something weird. Golem got 4 kills in the game that just happened. Dusclops, someone will not be able to kill because they don't bring knockoff or taunt or whatever. Look at those. It is Chansey light or Chansey dead. And Scrafty's bulk is insane. Combustion. It's going to be I think a very Andy season, very Andy stage for him. He's gonna love his team.
Yeah, I would say again, it's that top 6 or something. But what makes this team so much better, in my opinion, than other teams is the utilization of the low tiers, like you're saying. Dusclops is packing some serious bulk, which is really helping this team. Speed boost really good on this team. And Alolan Golem, we've already seen what it can do. And again, I really do, even though Andy kind of caps out at base 110 speed, I think that the speed tiers, especially in the lower tiers, like 45, 55, 60, 61, I guess there's a bit of a speed. But I think they'll serve him pretty well, especially with the Dragon Dance Gyarados that we all know and love.
If I were to be critical, as I like to do, having your fastest Pokemon being your Mega is tough. Having, yeah, I mean, I don't see. So it's not like speed tiers are more than just simply this base speeds. There's also like what is a good Scarfer. Celesteela, even though it's base 61 speed, is not a good Scarfer. Gyarados is not a good Scarfer because it has other ways to boost its speed. Silvally has to be normal type if you want to scarf it. Shaman is not a good scarfer. If he wants to outspeed things, it looks like it's like potential Latios is a scarfer. Is that it? I mean, yeah, he can get to those middle things and those steel types with like Scarf, Alolan Golem, and don't wait around because then Scrafty or Combustion or Latios are going to get very fast, or very quickly. Same with Mega Diancie has Rock Polish. So he has ways to get to speed, but that straight speed, I think, is a bit of an issue and why I didn't rate it higher. But that's all I'll say about this team. What about you?
Yeah, I think we've sort of said it. I rated this team a B+.
Awesome. And I rated, even with all those criticisms, I rated this team an A-.
Oh, one more thing I just like. So Celesteela has been drafted every season since season 5, or since season 6 maybe. And every single time it's been drafted with a water ground type. Just check the sort of type combinations out. Swampert is only weak to grass type, which Celesteela quad resists. Celesteela is weak to fire and electric, which Swampert is either immune to or quad resist. That's pretty so I think it's noteworthy that every single Celesteela has been paired with a water ground type.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's a little tried and true point for the Virginia Wahoot Hoots this season. Next is I'll Talk Up is the number 2 team, won best speed tiers, and nominated for Dragon Fairy Steel and check all the boxes. This is your co-host, the man who could not lower his grade that I gave him, is Punxsutawney Pachirisu, Coach Adam. I mean, it really does check all the boxes, and it doesn't even check it in like a middling way that I think my team does. I think it checks all the boxes, but is like high mid tier to high tier in each of those categories. I'm trying to think if there's anything about this team that we haven't already talked about. I like Swellow, Azelf, Nihilego as your fast options. You're not too terribly ground weak. In general, I think that like for your low tiers being Steelix and Tangela, I think that'll work really well on your team. Difference why I put you higher than Andy is I think that you have Scarfers. I think Nihilego is a great Scarfer. I think Azelf can be, and Swellow could be like pivot Scarfers. I think Rotom Heat is an amazing base, like mid 50s Scarfer with Volt Switch and Defog and stuff like that. So this is the kind of team that like not only utilizes speed tiers, but has good Scarfers that'll help get them into the Pokemon that will wreck your team. Adam, is this your favorite team that you've drafted?
Oh, I don't know about that. It might be. I'd have to go back and check. Right now, the thing I'm most excited about is Mega Heracross. I wasn't really in. I got sniped. So, just as some background, I got sniped twice before it got to me. Coco Conkeldurr, and both of those were taken before it was my. So I sort of scrambled and went with a Zygarde Phoenix, which I'm really excited. Mega Heracross fits in well with that, and
Yeah.
I base 180. I think the second it's only weaker than Pokemon like Mega Medicham, Pokemon with pure power like Mega Medicham, and like Mega Mew. Um, so Mega Heracross, especially with base 75 speed, is really good for a wall breaker. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what this Pokemon's.
Yeah, I think you have a team that can pair well against the hyper offensive teams because you have the bulk to try to shut them down, but also against like the stall teams, because you have the like aggro to wall break. I think you'll be very flexible with this team, and that's why I gave it number two overall, and why if you could rate it as well, you would give it number two.
Well, thank you. Um, our number one overall team, they were nominated for Best Speed Tiers, nominated for Physical Special Split, nominated for the Best Dragon Fairy Steel Core, and won the best offensive core overall. Give it up. New coach, the Columbus Cobalions. Hey.
Yay!
Yep. Um,
Yeah, I mean, what was it? What was Brian's last year? Was he third best for
yeah.
each of us, or third? Or it was top
Yeah.
three.
Yep.
And he had Coco Lucha with Volcarona and a bunch of setup and pivot options and stuff like that. And this is just like that, but you could get Megalodios round two. Fine.
Right. We'll take it. And we always talk about, at least in our meta, how Pokemon like Crocodile are really valued. Kofagrig as a tier 3. Kofagrigus is really valued as a tier. Um, and some of those like picks, their tiers
Yes,
also really lift this team up.
absolutely. Um, I mean, yeah, there's not anything that's dead weight. Um, Similar to, I think, more like Andy's team. If you're like, oh man, I really can't deal with Latios, so you pack a dark move or an ice move on every Pokemon. Well, now you don't have a stab move or a coverage move to hit Lucario, or you spend all of your energy trying to cover for Quiver Dance Volcarona, that it leaves yourself open for. I mean, even if you try to scarf something to get past Volcarona, you have to deal with Halucha, who's with Unburden is even faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think it's a good team. I think the hazards are sweet with hyper offense. Having those options to spin, rapid spin, works really great with this type of team. And getting spikes, getting toxic spikes, getting stealth rocks, putting them up early and keeping them there, by just not letting them have a chance to switch. Um, yeah, this will be a Ryan's new to the league. He's not new to playing draft league Pokemon, so it'll be an interesting first start, especially given since I think he drafted the best team.
Yeah. Yeah. And so overall, I gave this team an A. This is my only in the draft.
Yeah, this is the only true A for me too. Strong to decent A. We'll see what these teams can do. I have to do my match here in a minute. But if you have any last thoughts, any recaps that we haven't got to yet, or any like final points before we close out, um,
Yeah.
now's your chance, Adam.
Yeah. Thanks. I just want to reiterate a little bit that I think we keep getting better and better as a league, and we're seeing teams drafting sort of improving, and in some ways, though, we're also seeing like a bit of a level. Like for example, this team that Coach Ryan has drafted is very similar to what Brian T drafted, though with the critical edition of Megalodios, that was more about how the draft went than about which coach
Right.
would. And so I think that's kind of cool for me to see that we are having this leveling out where we're
Right.
not that there's like a skill plateau, but that there are some things that we figured out that and it's
Right.
they work because they are internally consistent to Pokemon. Not we were able to trick the rest of the
Right. And
coaches in
it's
the
like,
league
I
somehow.
mean, if someone on YouTube drafted a team like this, it's a good team. You know, if someone on YouTube drafted some of the best teams from last season, those are good teams. And so it's like you maybe if we started with more of like an incline, gradual incline, now we're getting that plateau where it's just like there are just some conditions in draft league that mean that there's only certain, you have to get one of every tier plus another tier three, and then you only have a certain number of uh, Z points or a certain number of points for the rest of your free Pokemon, and the fact that you're drafting live alongside over 10 other coaches, like there's just a little bit of like we're starting to get to across the board more what it's like across leagues on like the types of teams that happen and the type of play styles that you can get from it. We're starting to see diversity as like with hyper offense and stall and like bulky offense and different cores and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for this team, and I think that we'll see during matches like just more mature builds, more mature playing, and yeah, I think that like um like we're not that new draft league anymore.
Yeah,
At least it doesn't feel like that.
we're approaching 2 years. So
Right.
pretty exciting. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. I know this was sort of, but leave a like, comment, and subscribe. No,
Yeah.
um, yeah, please
All right.
engage with this. Let us know what you think of your team. Let us know what you think of other people's teams. We're excited about this next season.
Yeah, if you can think of any other superlatives, write them in and then give your nominations and stuff. Because I think the superlatives was a cool thing. I hope you guys liked it too.
Yep.
Talk to you later.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.